Captain Blake Morrison sat in his command chair looking at the endless stars through the main screen of the heavy cruiser Ironhawk. The ship moved slowly through the outer rim sectors on what should have been a routine patrol mission. Nothing exciting ever happened out here in the empty space between star systems. Morrison liked it that way because it meant no one was dying today. Lieutenant Eva Torres stood at her tactical station running system checks on the weapon arrays. Her fingers moved quickly across the control panel as she made sure everything was ready in case they needed to fight. She had been doing this job for 3 years and knew that being prepared was the difference between coming home alive or floating dead in space. Petty Officer Rick Dunham sat at the communications console, listening to the usual chatter from nearby ships. Most of it was boring talk about cargo shipments and weather reports from distant colonies. He adjusted his headset and continued monitoring all the radio frequencies that ships used to talk to each other in this part of space. Commander Nora Reeves worked in the engine room, making sure the Ironhawk could move fast if needed. She had been fixing ships for 15 years and knew every bolt and wire in this vessel. The engines hummed quietly as they pushed the ship forward through the darkness between stars. Everything changed when Dunham heard something strange coming through his headset. The signal was weak and filled with static, but he could tell it was a distress call. He turned up the volume and listened carefully as the desperate voice became clearer. "This is Dr. Velix of the research vessel Veltar calling any ship that can hear this message," the alien voice said in broken human language. "We need help right now or we are all going to die. Please respond if you can hear us." Dunham looked at Captain Morrison with wide eyes. The captain had heard the message too and was already standing up from his chair. Torres stopped what she was doing and turned to listen as the alien continued speaking. "My people discovered something terrible while doing research in deep space," Dr. Velix continued. "The Scarian Empire has built a huge invasion fleet hidden in the void between star systems. They are planning to attack 5 different worlds at the same time and kill everyone living there." Morrison felt his blood turn cold. The Scarian Empire was known throughout the galaxy for being cruel and violent. They would attack peaceful planets just to take slaves and steal resources. If they were planning something this big, then millions of innocent people were in danger. "Our ship was damaged when we tried to escape after finding their fleet," the alien said. "We are being hunted by Scarian warships and cannot run anymore. The information we carry could save billions of lives, but only if someone comes to help us. Please respond if anyone can hear this." Torres checked her long-range sensors and found the source of the signal. "Captain, the transmission is coming from coordinates 7 light hours away from our current position," she reported. "I'm picking up multiple ships in that area, but I cannot tell how many or what type they are." Morrison walked over to the navigation station and looked at the star charts. The location was an empty space far from any trade routes or colonies. It was the perfect place to hide a secret fleet if someone wanted to prepare for war without being seen. "Reeves, how fast can we get to those coordinates?" Morrison asked through the ship communication system. "If I push the engines to maximum burn, we can be there in 6 hours, came the reply from the engine room. "But that means running the reactors at dangerous levels for an extended time." Morrison thought about their situation. The Ironhawk was just one ship with a crew of 200 people. They had no idea how many enemy vessels they might face when they reached the alien ship. Any sane captain would call for backup and wait for a full fleet to arrive, but Morrison knew that help would take days or weeks to reach them, and the alien ship might not have that much time. He also knew that if the Scarian were really planning to attack 5 worlds at once, then waiting could mean the death of billions of innocent people. "Dunham, tried to contact the alien ship and tell them we are coming," Morrison ordered. "Torres, I want you to prepare all weapon systems and load our strongest missiles. Reeves, take us to maximum burn and get us there as fast as possible." The crew jumped into action as the Ironhawk changed course and accelerated toward the distant coordinates. Torres began charging the weapon systems while Dunham tried to send a reply to the alien distress call. The ship vibrated as Reeves pushed the engines harder than they were designed to run. Dr. Velix, this is Captain Morrison of the human ship Ironhawk, Dunham transmitted. We received your distress call and are coming to help you. Hold on for 6 more hours and we will be there. They waited for a reply but only heard static for several minutes. Finally, the alien voice came through again, sounding even more desperate than before. Thank you, Captain Morrison, but you must hurry, Dr. Velix said. The Scarian hunters have found us and are closing in for the attack. We do not have much time left before they destroy our ship and kill everyone aboard. Torres studied her tactical display showing the area around the alien ship. Captain, I am detecting 3 unknown vessels approaching the distress signal location, she reported. Based on their size and energy signatures, they appear to be Scarian hunter ships. Morrison clenched his fists as he realized they might already be too late. Hunter ships were fast and deadly vessels used by the Scarian to track down escaped slaves and destroy enemy scouts. 3 of them against 1 damaged research ship would be like wolves attacking a wounded deer. How much longer until we reach them? Morrison asked. 4 hours and 30 minutes at current speed, Torres replied. Morrison knew that was too long. The alien ship would be destroyed long before they arrived to help. He made a decision that went against everything they taught at the military academy about proper tactics and safety procedures. Reeves, give me everything the engines have, Morrison ordered. I do not care if we burn out the reactors. Push this ship as hard as it will go. Captain, that could damage the ship permanently, Reeves warned through the communication system. Better a damaged ship than a dead alien crew, Morrison replied. Do it now? The Ironhawk shuddered as Reeves diverted power from life support and other systems to feed the engines. The ship accelerated faster than it had ever gone before as they raced through space toward an unknown enemy. Warning lights flashed on every control panel as the systems strained beyond their limits. Torres prepared for battle by loading their most powerful weapons and calculating attack patterns. Dunham kept listening to the radio, hoping to hear that the alien ship was still alive. Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak past as they flew toward what might be their doom. Captain, we are approaching the target coordinates, Torres announced after what felt like forever. I am detecting 4 ships total. 1 appears to be heavily damaged and not moving. The other 3 are circling it like predators. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the enemy ships. They were smaller than the Ironhawk, but faster and more maneuverable. The aliens were right about being hunted because the Scarian vessels had clearly been toying with their prey before moving in for the kill. All hands prepare for combat, Morrison announced to the entire ship. We are about to engage 3 enemy vessels to rescue survivors of an alien research ship. This is what we train for people, so let's show these Scarian hunters what humans can do. The Ironhawk dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the battle zone. On the main screen, they could see the damaged alien ship floating helplessly, while 3 Scarian hunters circled around it. The enemy had not noticed the human ship yet because they were focused on their prey. Torres locked weapons onto the nearest Scarian vessel and waited for orders. Morrison studied the tactical situation and made his choice. They would have 1 chance to surprise the enemy before the real fighting began. Morrison did not waste time with warnings or formal challenges like most alien species expected in space combat. The moment Torres had target lock, he gave the order that would change everything. Fire all weapons, Morrison commanded. The Ironhawk unleashed a devastating barrage of missiles and energy beams at the closest Scarian hunter ship. The enemy vessel had no shields raised because they thought they were safe in empty space. Human weapons tore through their hull like paper and the ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The 2 remaining Scarian ships spun around in shock as debris from their destroyed companions scattered across space. They had never seen anyone attack without first issuing formal challenges or demanding surrender. These humans had just opened fire like wild animals with no honor or proper procedure. Torres was already targeting the second ship before the first one finished exploding. She fired another volley of missiles while Reeves pushed the engines too. Bring them closer to the enemy. The Scarian tried to raise their shields, but human weapons were already punching holes in their armor. The damaged alien Research ship Veltar drifted between the combatants as the battle raged around it. Through the chaos, Dr. Velix watched in amazement as the single human vessel fought 3 enemy ships at once, without showing any fear or hesitation. "The humans fight like demons," Velix whispered to his assistant as they watched the Ironhawk ram directly into the second Skarian ship. The impact crushed both vessels together in a grinding collision of metal and sparks. Morrison had ordered the ramming attack because human ships were built stronger than most alien vessels. Earth was a dangerous planet where everything tried to kill you, so humans learned to build things that could survive impacts and explosions. The Ironhawk pulled away from the collision with damage to its front armor, but the Skarian ship was split in half and leaking atmosphere. The last enemy vessel tried to escape by running toward the edge of the system. Torres tracked it with her weapons while Reeves adjusted course to intercept. The Skarian ship was faster, but the humans had better weapons and were not afraid to take risks. "Target their engines," Morrison ordered. "I want to capture at least one of them alive for questioning." Torres fired precisely aimed shots that disabled the enemy ship engines without destroying the entire vessel. The Skarian hunter drifted helplessly as the Ironhawk approached with weapons still locked on target. "This is Captain Morrison to the Skarian vessel," Dunham transmitted on all frequencies. "Surrender now, or we will destroy you like we destroyed your friends." The enemy ship did not respond, but Torres detected them preparing to self-destruct rather than be captured. Morrison made a quick decision and ordered Torres to destroy the ship before it could explode on its own. The last Skarian hunter vanished in another flash of light. With the immediate threat eliminated, Morrison turned his attention to the damaged alien ship. The Veltar was leaking air and had multiple hull breaches but appeared to still have living crew aboard. "Dr. Velix, this is Captain Morrison," Dunham transmitted to the alien ship. "The enemy vessels have been destroyed. Do you need medical assistance or emergency evacuation?" The reply came quickly and filled with gratitude that surprised the human crew. "Captain Morrison, you have saved our lives and possibly the lives of billions of others. We have wounded crew members who need help, but our most important need is to share the intelligence we gathered about the Skarian invasion fleet." Morrison ordered the ship medical team to prepare for alien casualties while Torres kept scanning for more enemy ships. They brought the Ironhawk alongside the damaged Veltar and extended docking tubes to allow crew members to move between the vessels. Dr. Velix was the first alien to board the human ship, and Morrison was struck by how different the Quilani looked from humans. Velix had blue skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He moved gracefully despite his obvious exhaustion and fear. "Captain Morrison, I cannot express how grateful my people are for your courage," Velix said in careful human language. "Most species would have called for reinforcements and waited for orders from their superiors. You risked everything to save strangers you had never met." Morrison helped the alien doctor to a chair in the conference room while his medical team treated the other Quilani survivors. There were 12 aliens total, and 3 of them had serious injuries from when their ship was damaged escaping the Skarian fleet. "Dr. Velix, tell me about this invasion fleet you discovered," Morrison said. "How many ships are we talking about, and where are they planning to attack?" Velix activated a small device that projected a 3-dimensional map of local star systems. Red dots appeared at 5 different locations showing the planned targets of the Skarian attack. "Our research team was studying quantum phenomena in deep space when we accidentally detected the invasion fleet," Velix explained. "They have assembled over 200 warships in the void between star systems where no one would think to look for them." Torres studied the projected map and felt her heart sink. The 5 target systems included major trade worlds and colonial settlements with millions of inhabitants. If the Skarian attacked them all at once, then the death toll would be beyond imagination. "The attack is scheduled to begin in 72 hours, Velix continued. "They plan to jump simultaneously to all 5 systems and destroy any resistance before help can arrive. By the time your coalition fleet responds, it will be too late to save anyone." Morrison walked around the map, studying the tactical situation. The nearest coalition fleet was weeks away even at maximum speed. They could send warning messages to the target systems, but civilian populations could not fight off a full-scale military invasion. Dr. Felix, does your ship carry any weapons or technology that could help us fight this fleet? Morrison asked. Felix looked surprised by the question. Captain, you cannot seriously be considering an attack on the invasion fleet with just one ship. They have over 200 vessels, including massive battleships and carriers. Sometimes one ship is all you have to work with, Morrison replied. Tell me what equipment you have that might be useful in a fight. Felix hesitated, then activated another display showing the technical specifications of Quilani research equipment. We have experimental quantum resonance devices that can interfere with faster-than-light drive systems. In theory, it could disable ships, but we have never tested it as a weapon. Torres looked at the technical data and saw possibilities that the alien scientist had not considered. Captain, if we could modify this quantum device and combine it with our weapon systems, we might be able to disrupt the enemy fleet formation. A new voice spoke from the entrance to the conference room. A smaller Quilani with mechanical implants on his arm stepped forward and bowed to Morrison. I am Prex, the chief engineer of the Veltar, the alien said. I have been listening to your conversation, and I believe I can modify our quantum resonance technology to work with human weapon systems. Morrison looked at the alien engineer with interest. What exactly are you proposing, Prex? The quantum resonance device creates a field that destabilizes faster than light engines, Prex explained. If we could amplify the field and target it at the center of the Scarian fleet formation, we could trap them in normal space and prevent them from escaping or reinforcing each other. Torres ran calculations on her portable computer and nodded. Slowly, it could work, Captain, but someone would have to deliver the device directly into the middle of the enemy fleet. That would be a suicide mission. Morrison studied the faces of his crew and the alien survivors. Everyone understood what they were discussing. One ship against 200 was not a battle, it was certain death for everyone involved. Dr. Felix, can you send messages to other ships in this area? Morrison asked. Are there any other vessels that might be willing to help us? Felix activated the communication equipment and began broadcasting on emergency frequencies used by all spacefaring species. The message was simple and desperate. This is Dr. Felix of the Quilani research vessel. Veltar broadcasting to any ship that can hear this transmission, the alien said. The Scarian Empire is preparing to launch a massive invasion that will destroy 5-star systems in 72 hours. We are requesting immediate assistance from any vessel willing to help prevent this catastrophe. They waited for responses, while Prex worked with Reeves to understand how human and Quilani technology could be combined. The first reply came from an unexpected source. This is Captain Rex Caldwell of the armed freighter Steel Runner, a gruff human voice said through the radio. I heard your message about the Scarian invasion and I want to help. My ship is not military, but we have weapons and the crew knows how to fight. More voices began responding to the emergency broadcast as word spread through local space. Captain Lisa Park of the survey ship Discovery volunteered her vessel along with 3 other small human ships that have been doing research and cargo runs in the area. Then something remarkable happened that surprised everyone on the Iron Hawk. A transmission came through in the growling language of the Vraxi-Volf warriors. Human ship, this is Alpha Gornith of the Vraxi Pack Hunters, the alien voice snarled. We have heard your call for battle against the Scarian slavers. My pack remembers the raids they made on our worlds, and we thirst for revenge. We will join your fight. Morrison looked at Torres, who was tracking the incoming ships on her sensors. Captain, we have 6 human vessels approaching our position along with 4 Vraxi warships, she reported. There is also something else on long-range sensors that I cannot identify yet. The unidentified ships revealed themselves when they got closer. 3 vessels appeared that had clearly been built by the Scarian Empire but were now flying under different flags. A transmission came from the lead ship in a mixture of alien languages. Human Captain, this is Commander Kelleny speaking for the Free Void Coalition, a female voice said. We are escaped slaves who stole these ships from our Scarian masters. When we heard about the invasion fleet, we knew we had to help stop them. We know their weaknesses better than anyone because we used to serve on ships just like the ones they are using now. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Ironhawk surrounded by tactical displays showing their growing fleet. 12 ships total against 200 was still impossible odds, but at least they were not facing the enemy alone anymore. All ships, this is Captain Morrison, he broadcast to the assembled vessels. We have less than 72 hours to stop. The largest invasion force ever assembled by the Scarian Empire. I will not lie to you about our chances of survival, but I can promise you that we will save billions of innocent lives if we succeed. He paused and looked around at his crew who were preparing for the most dangerous mission any of them had ever attempted. Anyone who wants to leave now can do so with no shame or dishonor, Morrison continued. But anyone who stays will be part of something that the galaxy will remember forever. We are going to show the Scarian Empire what happens when they threaten innocent people while Deathworlders are watching. Asterisk, 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 none of the ships left. Captain Rex Caldwell of the Steel Runner was the first to respond to Morrison's challenge. Captain Morrison, my crew voted and we are staying for the fight, Caldwell announced over the radio. The Steel Runner is just a freighter, but we have modified weapons and a crew that knows how to use them. The Scarian Empire has been raiding cargo ships for years, and it is time someone made them pay for it. Captain Lisa Park of the Discovery agreed immediately. My ship is designed for exploration, not combat, but we have some experimental weapons that might surprise the enemy. Count us in for whatever plan you have. The 3 other human ships also committed to the mission despite their captains knowing they were probably flying to their deaths. These were not military vessels with trained soldiers, but civilian ships with crews of merchants, miners, and explorers, who had chosen to fight because it was the right thing to do. Alpha Gornath of the Vraxi Pack spoke for his Volf warriors in their growling language that Dunham translated through the communication computer. The Alpha says his pack has been hunting Scarian slavers for 3 years since they raided his homeworld. He wants to know if humans are truly as crazy in battle as the stories say. Morrison smiled grimly as he replied to the alien warrior. Tell Alpha Gornath that he is about to find out exactly how crazy humans can be when we are protecting innocent people. Commander Kellenny of the escaped slaves had the most valuable intelligence about enemy tactics and technology. Her 3 stolen Scarian ships looked exactly like the vessels they would be fighting, which could provide crucial advantages in the coming battle. Captain Morrison, my people know the Scarian fleet structure and their standard operating procedures, Kellenny explained during a communication conference with all the ship captains. They expect enemies to follow traditional space combat rules, with formal challenges and organized battle lines. They do not know how to respond when opponents use unconventional tactics. Dr. Velix and Engineer Prex worked continuously with Commander Reeves to modify the quantum resonance device. The technology was complex and dangerous, but they were making progress toward creating a weapon that could disrupt an entire fleet. The quantum field generator must be placed at the exact center of the enemy formation to achieve maximum effect. Prex explained as he showed technical diagrams to the human engineers. The device will create a cascade reaction that disables faster-than-light drives within a spherical area, approximately 50 kilometers in diameter. Torres studied the tactical implications of the quantum weapon. If we can trap the Scarian fleet in normal space, they cannot escape or call for reinforcements. But someone has to deliver the device and manually activate it from inside the enemy formation. Morrison had already accepted that he would pilot the suicide mission himself. The Ironhawk was the largest and most heavily armed ship in their small fleet, so it had the best chance of fighting through enemy defenses to reach the target zone. I will take the Ironhawk on the delivery run, Morrison announced to the assembled captains. The rest of you will create a diversion to draw enemy attention away from the main attack. Alpha Gornath immediately objected to this plan in his snarling alien language. When Dunham translated the response, Morrison was surprised by what the Volf warrior had said. The Alpha says that humans may be crazy, but they are not stupid. He will not allow you to face death alone when his pack can fight beside you. Vraxi tradition demands that warriors who hunt together die together if necessary. Commander Kellenny also refused to accept Morrison's plan. Captain Morrison, you do not understand Skarian fleet tactics. They position their most powerful ships at the center of the formation to protect their command vessel. A single ship cannot fight through that many enemies no matter how well armed it is. Morrison looked at the tactical displays showing the size and composition of the enemy fleet. They were planning to attack. Over 200 ships, including massive battleships and carriers defended by layers of escorts and patrol vessels. Even with the quantum weapon, their chances of success were almost zero. Then what do you suggest, Commander Kellenny? Morrison asked. We use the fact that my ships look exactly like Skarian vessels, Kellenny replied. I can lead a small group disguised as returning patrol ships directly into the enemy formation. Once we are inside, we activate the quantum device and try to escape in the confusion. Torres shook her head as she analyzed Kellenny's proposal. Commander, your ships are too small to carry the quantum device and still have enough firepower to fight their way out. The generator is the size of a shuttlecraft and weighs several tons. Morrison studied the problem from every angle while his crew prepared the Ironhawk for what might be their final mission. They needed to get the quantum device into the center of the enemy fleet, but no single ship was large enough and fast enough to accomplish the task alone. Then Prex suggested something that changed everything about their strategy. Captain Morrison, what if we do not try to hide the quantum device? The Quilani engineer said. What if we make it part of the attack itself? Morrison looked confused, so Prex activated a holographic display showing his new idea. Instead of hiding the device inside a ship, they would mount it externally on the Ironhawk and use it as both a weapon and a beacon. The quantum field generator can be modified to create a directed energy pulse instead of a spherical field, Prex explained. We could fire it like a missile at the enemy command ship and achieve the same disruptive effect. Torres immediately saw the advantages of this approach. If we treat the device like a long-range weapon, we can fire it from outside the enemy. Defensive perimeter. We do not have to fly into the middle of their fleet formation. But Dr. Velix identified a critical problem with the modified plan. The quantum pulse will only work if it hits a ship with an active faster-than-light drive system. If the enemy fleet is not preparing to jump to their target systems, the weapon will have no effect. Morrison realized they needed to force the Skarian fleet to activate their jump drives before they were ready to begin the invasion. That meant making the enemy think they were under attack and needed to escape or reposition their forces. We make them think a coalition fleet has found their hiding place, Morrison decided. If we attack aggressively enough, they will panic and try to jump away from our position. That is when we hit them with the quantum pulse. Alpha Gornath liked this plan because it meant his Volf warriors could engage in direct combat instead of sneaking around like cowards. Commander Kellenny saw opportunities to use her knowledge of Skarian psychology to make the deception more convincing. Skarian commanders are arrogant and overconfident, Kellenny explained. If a small force attacks them, they will assume it is a scouting group for a much larger fleet. They will try to preserve their invasion force by retreating to a backup position. The next 24 hours were spent preparing for the most desperate gamble any of them had ever attempted. Prex and Reeves worked together to mount the quantum device on the Ironhawk, while Torres calculated firing solutions for a weapon that had never been tested in combat. Captain Caldwell modified his freighter to carry additional missiles, while Captain Park installed experimental sensors that could penetrate Skarian stealth systems. The three other human ships coordinated their tactics to present the illusion of being part of a larger force. The Vraxi pack hunters sharpened their weapons and painted war symbols on their ship hulls while singing battle songs that sounded like wolves howling at the moon. Alpha Gornath declared that this would be the greatest hunt in the history of his people. Commander Kellenny used her stolen Skarian ships to gather intelligence about the enemy fleet composition and defensive arrangements. Her vessels could approach the invasion force without triggering alarms because they appeared to be returning patrol ships. The Skarian admiral is commanding from a massive dreadnought called the Void Render, Kelani reported after her reconnaissance mission. It is positioned at the exact center of the fleet formation and surrounded by their most powerful escort ships. Morrison studied the intelligence data and finalized their attack plan. The 12-ship alliance would approach the enemy fleet from multiple directions to create the impression of a coordinated assault by superior forces. When the Skarian tried to retreat, Morrison would fire the quantum pulse at their command ship. Remember that our goal is not to destroy the enemy fleet, Morrison reminded all the ship captains during their final briefing. We just need to disable their faster-than-light drives and strand them in normal space. Coalition reinforcements will handle the cleanup operation after we prevent them from reaching their target systems. Dr. Velix made one final check of the quantum device while his surviving crew members prepared to transfer to other ships for safety. The Quilani scientist insisted on staying aboard the Ironhawk to monitor the weapon during the battle. Captain Morrison, I want you to know that my people will remember what you have done here, Velix said, as they prepared to depart for the enemy fleet. You could have called for help and waited for proper military support, but instead, you chose to risk everything to save strangers you had never met. Morrison looked around at his crew who were making final preparations for combat. Torres was running last-minute checks on all weapon systems while Dunham tested communication links with their allied ships. Reeves was pushing the engines to maximum efficiency for the high-speed approach they would need. Dr. Velix, my species evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day, Morrison replied. We learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to do something so crazy that your enemies never see it coming. The Ironhawk led the small fleet away from their hiding place toward the massive Skarian invasion force. Long-range sensors showed the enemy vessels arranged in a defensive formation that had been used successfully for hundreds of years, but the Skarian Empire had never fought humans before, and they did not understand how Deathworlders approached impossible situations. They were about to learn that some species would rather die fighting than live with the knowledge that they could have made a difference, and chose not to try. Torres detected the edge of the enemy sensor network and began electronic countermeasures to mask their approach. Captain, we are entering the outer detection grid. The Skarian will know we are here in approximately 30 minutes. Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system to address his entire crew. All hands, this is the captain speaking. In 30 minutes we will engage the largest enemy fleet ever assembled by the Skarian Empire. Our mission is to prevent them from destroying 5-star systems and killing billions of innocent people. He paused and looked at the tactical display, showing their tiny force approaching overwhelming enemy numbers. I know the odds are against us, but I also know that humans have faced impossible situations before and found a way to win. Today we show the galaxy what happens when Deathworlders decide that something is worth fighting for no matter what the cost. A Skarian invasion fleet detected the approaching human ships exactly when Torres predicted they would. Alarm signals spread through the enemy formation as patrol vessels moved to investigate the unknown contacts entering their defensive perimeter. Admiral Krex commanded the invasion force from the bridge of his massive dreadnought Void Render. He was confident that no enemy could threaten his carefully planned operation, but the appearance of hostile ships in this remote location concerned him. Report on the incoming vessels, Admiral Krex ordered his tactical officer. Sir, we detect 12 ships approaching from multiple vectors, the Skarian officer replied. They appear to be a mix of human and other species vessels. Their formation suggests they are the advanced scouts for a larger fleet. Admiral Krex studied the tactical display and made the decision that Morrison had hoped he would make. Rather than risk his invasion force in a premature battle, the Skarian commander chose to preserve his ships for their primary mission. Signal all vessels to prepare for emergency jump to the backup staging area, Admiral Krex commanded. We will not allow the Coalition to disrupt our operation by forcing us into battle before we are ready. Throughout the Skarian fleet 200 ships began charging their faster-than-light drive systems for an immediate retreat. The process would take several minutes to complete, which gave the human alliance the opportunity they needed. Morrison watched his tactical display as energy signatures throughout the enemy fleet began rising toward jump readiness. Torres are you detecting drive system activation in the enemy ships? Confirmed, Captain, Torres replied. Approximately 80% of their vessels are showing pre-jump energy buildup. The quantum pulse should be maximally effective in about 3 minutes. The Ironhawk led the Allied fleet in a high-speed approach toward the enemy formation while maintaining the illusion that they were scouts for a much larger force. Captain Caldwell and the other human ships spread out to create multiple target vectors that would confuse Skarian defensive systems. Alpha Gornith and his Vraxipack hunters accelerated past the human ships with their engines screaming at maximum power. The Volf warriors had no intention of hiding their approach because their culture demanded direct confrontation with enemies. The Vraxi are beginning their attack run, Torres reported as she tracked the alien warships closing with the enemy perimeter. They are drawing defensive fire away from our main approach vector. Morrison could see weapon exchanges beginning at the edge of the battle zone as Vraxi ships engaged Skarian patrol vessels. The Volf warriors fought with savage intensity that surprised their enemies, who expected more conventional tactics. Commander Kellenny used her stolen Skarian ships to create additional confusion by broadcasting false radio signals that made it seem like some enemy vessels were turning against their own fleet. Several Skarian captains began targeting each other in the chaos. Captain, the quantum device is fully charged and ready to fire. Dr. Velix reported from the weapons control station where he was monitoring the experimental technology. We need to target the enemy command ship when it begins its jump sequence. Torres locked her targeting systems onto the massive dreadnought Void Render at the center of the enemy formation. The ship was surrounded by layers of escort vessels, but the quantum pulse would penetrate their defenses and strike the primary target. The space around them erupted in weapon fire as more Skarian ships engaged the attacking alliance. Captain Park's Discovery took hits to its forward shields while returning fire with experimental plasma cannons that burned through enemy armor like acid. Discovery is taking heavy damage, Dunham reported as he monitored communications from their allied ships. Captain Park says they can continue fighting, but their main drive system is failing. Morrison made the tactical decision to begin the final approach toward firing position. The Ironhawk accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet center while Torres prepared to fire the quantum pulse at the perfect moment. All ships, this is Morrison, he broadcast to the Alliance fleet. We are beginning the final attack run. Create as much chaos as possible to keep the enemy focused on you instead of us. The response was immediate and violent as every Allied ship opened fire with everything they had. Captain Caldwell's Steel Runner launched a full spread of missiles. While using its heavily armored hull to ram smaller enemy vessels, the 3 additional human ships coordinated their attacks to overwhelm Skarian point defense systems. They fired in sequence so that enemy guns could not track all the incoming threats at once. Alpha Gornith led his pack in a coordinated assault that targeted the largest enemy ships with suicidal determination. Vraxi warriors preferred close combat, so they brought their vessels alongside Skarian ships and used boarding pods to fight hand-to-hand. Commander Kellenny's stolen ships continued broadcasting false orders that caused some enemy vessels to break formation or target friendly ships. The Skarian fleet structure began collapsing as individual captains tried to respond to contradictory commands. Through the chaos, Morrison guided the Ironhawk toward optimal firing position while Torres tracked the energy buildup in the enemy command ship. They needed to fire the quantum pulse at exactly the right moment to achieve maximum disruption. Captain, the Void Render is beginning its jump sequence, Torres announced. Drive system energy is approaching critical threshold for faster-than-light transition. Morrison watched the tactical display as his ship penetrated deeper into the enemy formation. Skarian escorts were firing at them, but most of their attention was focused on the other Alliance ships that were causing havoc throughout the fleet. Sir, I am detecting massive energy buildup throughout the enemy fleet, Torres continued. It looks like Admiral Krex is ordering a simultaneous jump by all vessels to avoid our attack. This was exactly what Morrison had hoped would happen. If the entire Skarian fleet tried to jump at the same time, the quantum pulse would disable all of them instead of just the command ship. "Dr. Velix, is the quantum device ready to fire?" Morrison asked. "The weapon is fully charged," Captain Velix replied. "But I must warn you that firing it at this range will expose us to the full effects of the quantum cascade. Our own faster-than-light drives will be disabled along with the enemy ships." Morrison had expected this consequence, but it did not change his decision. Stranding themselves along with the enemy fleet was an acceptable price to pay for preventing the invasion of five-star systems. "Torres, fire the quantum pulse at the enemy command ship," Morrison ordered. The quantum device mounted on the Ironhawk's hull discharged a brilliant beam of energy that struck the void render just as its faster-than-light drives reached critical activation threshold. The effect was immediate and devastating as quantum disruption cascaded through every ship in the enemy fleet. 200 Skarian vessels that had been preparing to jump to faster-than-light speed suddenly found their drive systems completely dead. The quantum cascade effect spread from ship to ship like a virus, disabling every faster-than-light capable system within 50 kilometers. Admiral Krex stared in shock at his tactical displays as his entire invasion fleet became stranded in normal space. "What happened to our jump drives?" he demanded. "Sir, all faster-than-light systems are showing complete failure," his tactical officer reported. "We are detecting some kind of quantum interference that is preventing drive activation." Morrison felt the Ironhawks shudder as their own faster-than-light drives failed along with the enemy systems. They were now trapped in the same situation as the Skarian fleet, but that had always been part of the plan. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison," he broadcast to the Alliance fleet. "The quantum pulse has been fired successfully. Enemy faster-than-light capabilities have been neutralized." The response from his allied ships was mixed as they realized they were also stranded without faster-than-light travel. But Captain Caldwell was the first to point out the strategic importance of what they had accomplished. "Captain Morrison, this is Steel Runner," Caldwell transmitted. "Our drives are dead, but so are theirs. The Skarian cannot reach their target systems, and they cannot call for reinforcements. We have stopped the invasion." Torres confirmed the success of their mission as she analyzed sensor data from throughout the battle zone. "Captain, I am reading complete faster-than-light drive failure in all enemy vessels. The invasion fleet is effectively trapped here until they can repair their systems." But the battle was far from over because the Skarian fleet still had conventional weapons in overwhelming numbers. Admiral Krex quickly realized that while his strategic mission had failed, he could still destroy the small force that had trapped his fleet. "All ships target the human vessels that attacked us," Admiral Krex ordered. "I want them destroyed completely as an example to any other species that considers interfering with Skarian operations." The space around the Alliance fleet erupted in weapon fire as dozens of enemy ships focused their attacks on the 12 vessels that had stopped their invasion. The Ironhawk took multiple hits to its armor while Torres returned fire with everything they had. Captain Park's Discovery exploded in a brilliant flash as concentrated enemy fire overwhelmed its shields and punctured its reactor core. The brave crew died instantly, but their sacrifice had helped save billions of lives on the worlds that would have been invaded. "Discovery has been destroyed," Dunham reported with sadness in his voice. "No survivors detected." Morrison felt rage building inside him as he watched good people die for doing the right thing. The Skarian Empire had chosen this fight, and now they would learn why humans were considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy. "All remaining ships concentrate fire on the enemy command vessel," Morrison ordered. "If we are going to die here, then we take their admiral with us." The surviving Alliance ships turned their weapons toward the massive dreadnought Void Render while fighting off attacks from smaller enemy vessels. Alpha Gornith's pack had lost 2 ships, but the remaining Vraxi continued fighting with the fury of cornered wolves. Captain Caldwell's Steel Runner rammed another enemy ship in a devastating collision that destroyed both vessels. The brave freighter captain died as his ship exploded, but his sacrifice opened a path for the other Alliance ships to attack the command vessel. Captain, we have incoming missiles from multiple enemy ships, Torres warned as she tracked dozens of projectiles converging on their position. I cannot intercept them all with our point defense systems. Morrison braced for impact as enemy weapons struck the Ironhawk from several directions at once. The ship's armor held, but he could feel the vessel dying around them as critical systems failed under the sustained bombardment. Engineering reports main power is failing, Reeves announced through the communication system. We have maybe 10 minutes before complete system shutdown. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing their desperate situation. The Alliance fleet had been reduced to 5 ships while the enemy still had over 150 vessels operational. They had succeeded in stopping the invasion, but they were about to pay for that. Success with their lives? Then something unexpected appeared on the edge of the sensor network that changed everything about the battle. Torres detected massive energy signatures approaching at high speed from the direction of Coalition space. Captain, I am reading multiple faster-than-light transitions at the system perimeter, Torres reported with excitement in her voice. Coalition fleet elements are arriving in force. Morrison watched in amazement as dozens of Coalition warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately began engaging the stranded Skarian fleet. The quantum pulse had done more than disable enemy drives, it had also created a beacon visible throughout local space that called for help. Admiral Krex realized his situation had become hopeless as Coalition ships surrounded his disabled fleet. The invasion force that was supposed to conquer 5-star systems was now trapped and outnumbered by enemies who could maneuver freely while his ships remained stuck in normal space. Morrison smiled grimly as he watched Coalition forces systematically disable and capture the Skarian fleet. The mission had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, and the price paid by the Alliance would be remembered as the moment when Deathworlders proved that sometimes the impossible just needed someone crazy enough to try it. The Coalition fleet that arrived to finish the battle was led by Admiral Sarah Kane aboard the battleship Defiant. She had received the quantum beacon signal from halfway across the sector and immediately assembled every available ship for a high-speed response to what appeared to be a major enemy operation. Kane studied the tactical situation as her fleet surrounded the disabled Skarian invasion force. Over 150 enemy ships were stranded in normal space, while a handful of badly damaged Alliance vessels drifted among the wreckage of their fallen comrades. Communications, get me Captain Morrison of the Ironhawk, Admiral Kane ordered. I want to know how 12 ships managed to disable an entire Skarian invasion fleet. Morrison received the transmission while his crew worked frantically to keep their dying ship operational. Main power was failing and life support was running on emergency backup systems that would not last much longer. Admiral Kane, this is Captain Morrison, he replied through their damaged communication array. We have successfully prevented the Skarian fleet from reaching their target systems, but we have taken heavy casualties in the process. Kane looked at her tactical display showing the enormous enemy fleet that had been trapped by such a small force. Captain Morrison, how exactly did you manage to disable their faster-than-light drives with only 12 ships? Morrison explained. The quantum cascade weapon, while Dr. Velix provided technical details about how the device had been modified from Quilani research equipment. The alien scientist was exhausted but insisted on sharing the scientific data that had made their victory possible. Admiral, the quantum resonance technology could be adapted for defensive use throughout Coalition space, Velix suggested. Any star system equipped with these devices would be immune to surprise attacks by enemy fleets. Admiral Kane immediately understood the strategic implications of what the Quilani scientist was proposing. The ability to trap enemy fleets in normal space would revolutionize space combat and give the Coalition a decisive advantage over aggressive species like the Skarian Empire. Dr. Velix, I want your research team to work with our best scientists to develop this technology for fleet deployment, Kane decided. Captain Morrison, your actions here today have not only saved 5-star systems but potentially changed the balance of power in this entire sector. The rescue operation began immediately as Coalition ships moved to assist the surviving Alliance vessels. The Ironhawk was too badly damaged to repair in space, so Admiral Kane ordered it towed to the nearest shipyard for complete reconstruction, Alpha. Gornath and his surviving Vraxi pack were treated as heroes by the Coalition Marines who came aboard their ships. The Volf warriors had fought with such courage that they earned the respect of every human who witnessed their sacrifice. The Alpha says his pack wishes to continue hunting alongside human warriors, Dunham translated, as the alien leader spoke to Morrison during the evacuation. He believes that humans and Vraxi together are the perfect combination for fighting enemies of peace. Commander Kellenny and her escaped slaves were offered full citizenship in Coalition space along with official pardons for stealing the ships they had used to fight their former masters. Many of them chose to join Coalition fleet operations where their knowledge of enemy technology would be invaluable. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Iron Hawk, watching as Coalition engineers worked to stabilize their failing systems. Torres had been injured during the final battle, but remained at her post coordinating with the rescue ships. "Captain, we are receiving transmission from the surface of Kepler Prime," Dunham announced. "It is one of the star systems that was targeted. For invasion, they want to thank us for saving their world." The message from Kepler Prime was followed by similar transmissions from all 5 systems that had been marked for destruction by the Scarian invasion fleet. Billions of people who would have died in the attack were now safe because 12 ships had been willing to fight impossible odds. Dr. Velix approached Morrison as the captain prepared to transfer to a Coalition medical ship for treatment of his injuries. The Quilani scientist carried a datapad containing the complete technical specifications for quantum resonance technology. "Captain Morrison, I want you to have this information," Velix said as he handed over the device. "My people owe our lives to your courage, and we want to make sure this technology is used to protect others who cannot defend themselves." Morrison accepted the datapad and looked at the alien who had started this entire mission with a desperate distress call. "Dr. Velix, what will you do now that your research ship has been destroyed?" "The Coalition has offered my team a permanent research facility to continue developing quantum weapons," Velix replied. "We have decided to accept because we believe this technology can prevent wars instead of starting them." Admiral Kane arrived on the Ironhawk Bridge to personally meet the captain who had accomplished the impossible with such limited resources. She had read the preliminary battle reports but wanted to understand how Morrison had convinced so many different species to follow him into certain death. "Captain Morrison, I have been fighting space battles for 20 years, and I have never seen anything like what you accomplished here," Kane said. "How did you know that the other ships would follow you against such overwhelming odds?" Morrison looked around at his crew who were still working despite their exhaustion and injuries. Torres was helping coordinate the evacuation while Reeves supervised the engineering teams trying to save their ship. "Admiral, I did not know they would follow us," Morrison admitted. "But I knew that if we did not try, then billions of innocent people would die. Sometimes that is enough reason to take a chance on doing something impossible." Kane studied the human captain and began to understand why other species both feared and respected humans throughout the galaxy. These Deathworlders did not calculate odds or wait for permission when they saw injustice that needed to be stopped. "Captain Morrison, the Coalition Council wants to award you and your crew the highest honors for heroism in the face of overwhelming enemy forces," Kane announced. "You will also be promoted to Admiral and given command of a new task force dedicated to preventing future surprise attacks." Morrison was surprised by the offer but realized that the battle against the Scarian invasion fleet was just the beginning of a larger conflict. There would be other aggressive species who needed to learn that threatening innocent people while humans were watching was a very dangerous mistake. "Admiral Kane, I accept the promotion and the new command," Morrison decided. "But I want to include Alpha Gornath and Commander Kellenny in the task force leadership structure. This mission succeeded because different species worked together, and I want to continue that cooperation." The evacuation of the Alliance survivors took several hours as Coalition medical teams treated wounded crew members and engineers, worked to salvage equipment from the damaged ships. The Steel Runner was a total loss, but Captain Caldwell's sacrifice had saved countless lives. 3 months later, Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, indomitable watching as the first quantum resonance defense platforms were installed around major coalition worlds. The technology developed by Dr. Velix had been refined and improved until it could protect entire star systems from surprise attacks. Alpha. Gornith commanded a squadron of Raxi hunters that worked alongside human ships to patrol the border, regions where aggressive species might threaten peaceful worlds. The Volf warriors had found their perfect hunting ground among the stars. Commander Kelani led a special operations unit composed entirely of former slaves who had escaped from various hostile empires. They used their knowledge of enemy technology and tactics to rescue other enslaved populations throughout the galaxy. Torres had been promoted to captain and given command of a heavy cruiser in Morrison's task force. She specialized in developing new combat tactics that combined human aggression with alien technology to create fighting methods that confused traditional enemies. Dr. Velix established a research institute that brought together scientists from dozens of species to develop defensive technologies. The Quilani had discovered that sharing knowledge was more effective than trying to hide it from potential enemies. Morrison received regular reports about the impact their victory was having throughout the galaxy. The Scarian Empire had been forced to abandon their aggressive expansion plans after losing their entire invasion fleet. Other hostile species were reconsidering their own military adventures after learning what had happened to the supposedly invincible Scarian Armada, but the most important change was in how different species viewed cooperation with humans. The battle against the invasion fleet had proved that Deathworlders were not just dangerous to their enemies but incredibly valuable as allies for anyone who shared their commitment to protecting innocent life. Admiral, we are receiving a distress call from the Outer Rim sectors, Torres reported during their latest patrol mission. It appears to be another species requesting help against raiders who are threatening their colonies. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the location of the emergency signal. It was in the same region where this entire adventure had started with Dr. Velix's desperate call for assistance. Captain Torres set course for the distress signal location, Morrison ordered. Signal Alpha Gornath and Commander Kelani to rendezvous with us at maximum speed. As the task force changed course toward another impossible mission, Morrison reflected on how much had changed since that first encounter with the Quilani research ship. The galaxy was learning that some species would fight hopeless battles to protect strangers and that courage could be more powerful than any weapon. The Ironhawk had been rebuilt and returned to patrol duty with Captain Blake Morrison's name permanently engraved on a memorial plaque in the main corridor. The ship that had started as a simple patrol vessel had become a symbol of what could be accomplished. When someone was willing to risk everything for the right cause, Torres detected multiple ships approaching their position as they neared the new distress signal. Admiral, we have several vessels responding to the emergency call, including ships from species we have never encountered before. Morrison smiled as he realized that the example set by their small alliance was spreading throughout the galaxy. Other species were learning that working together was more effective than facing threats alone. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, he broadcast to the assembling fleet. Let's go show whoever is threatening innocent people what happens when Deathworlders and their friends decide that enough is enough. The combined fleet accelerated toward another desperate battle against impossible odds, but Morrison was no longer worried about the outcome. The galaxy had learned that some fights were worth having regardless of the cost, and that humans would never be alone as long as there were others who shared their belief that protecting innocent life was worth any sacrifice. The legend of the Deathworlders had begun with 12 ships against 200, but it would continue as long as there were those who refused to accept that evil could triumph simply because it had superior numbers. The Scarian invasion fleet had been stopped, but the real victory was in proving that courage could inspire others to become heroes themselves. Commander Marcus Blake stood on the bridge of the human warship Valiant and stared at the message playing on his screen. The alien words came through the translator, but they still sounded strange and frightening. He had heard this message 12 times now, but it still made his hands shake. The voice belonged to something called High Counselor Veltar from a group called the Ascendant Coalition. Marcus had never heard of them before, but their message was clear enough. They were dying, and they needed help from humans. The strange part was that they called humans Deathworlders like it was something scary. Lieutenant Torres worked at her station near the back of the bridge. She was young and smart, and Marcus trusted her with the important communications. She looked up at him with worried eyes when the message finished playing again. The alien voice had said their worlds were burning and something called the Devourers was eating everything in their path. They had thought humans were too primitive to help, but now they were begging. They said humans were the only ones who might survive what was coming next. Marcus walked to the big window that showed the stars outside. 3 days ago they had picked up this signal at the edge of human space. Now every ship in the human fleet was getting ready for something they had never done before. They were going to help aliens who had never wanted their help. Navigation Officer Rachel Kim called out from her station. Her voice was quiet, but everyone could hear the fear in it. She said their long-range sensors were picking up huge energy readings moving toward the Coalition worlds. Whatever had destroyed the alien fleets was heading for their home planets. Next, Marcus nodded and walked back to his command chair. Humanity had only been traveling between stars for 15 years. They had built their first faster-than-light ship when Marcus was still a young officer learning how to fly fighters. Back then, Earth seemed like the center of everything. Now they knew it was just one small world in a galaxy full of aliens who thought humans were dangerous. The other alien species called Earth a death world because everything on it tried to kill everything else. The gravity was too strong and the weather was too violent and the animals were too aggressive. Most aliens came from nice, quiet planets where nothing ever went wrong. They had built beautiful cities and peaceful societies while humans were still fighting wars and struggling to survive, but now those same peaceful aliens were calling for help from the dangerous humans they had always avoided. Marcus told Torres to contact Fleet Command on Earth. He wanted every ship they could spare. The big ships like Prometheus and Defiance and Retribution, the small fast ships and the slow heavy ones. Everything that could fly and fight. Chief Engineer David Park came up from the lower levels of the ship. His uniform was dirty from working on the engines and his face was serious. He had been studying the technical parts of the alien message. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of anything humans had built. But something had torn through their defenses like they were made of paper. David said if the aliens were calling humans for help, then they were looking at something worse than anything they could imagine. Marcus agreed. The aliens had energy shields that could stop anything and weapons that could crack moons in half. If their 3,000 ships had been destroyed in just 6 hours, then whatever did it was beyond human understanding, but humans had one advantage that the aliens did not have. They had been born on a world that tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. They knew how to fight when they were outmatched and how to survive when everything seemed hopeless. Marcus ordered Torres to send messages to all the human colonies. Mars and Europa and Titan and all the small outposts scattered across human space. Everyone would contribute what they could. Ships and weapons and supplies and people willing to fight. The klaxons started wailing across the ship as the crew prepared for departure. Marcus thought about the first time humans had met aliens 3 years ago. The Coalition had treated them like dangerous animals. They had put barriers around human space and told them not to expand. They had acted like humans were too violent and primitive to be trusted. Now those same aliens were begging the primitive Deathworlders to save them. Marcus looked at his crew rushing around the bridge getting ready for battle. These people had grown up hearing stories about how the galaxy saw Earth, a nightmare world where only the strongest and most violent creatures could survive. The aliens thought this made humans inferior and scary. They were about to learn that sometimes scary was exactly what you needed. The big screen showed Earth floating in space like a blue and white marble. It looked peaceful from this distance, but Marcus knew better. Down there storms raged and earthquakes shook the ground and predators hunted in every corner of land and sea. It was a world that had forged its children in fire and pain and endless Struggle Duck. Now the galaxy needed those children to fight something even worse than a death world. Something that consumed entire civilizations and turned them into nothing but raw materials for its expansion. Marcus sat down in his command chair and watched as more human ships appeared on his sensors. They came from every direction as the fleet assembled for the first time in human history. Warships that had been built to fight other humans in the old wars before they reached the stars. Freighters that had been converted to carry weapons and soldiers. Even the old exploration ships that had first mapped the routes between human worlds. 67 ships in total. Not much compared to the 3,000 that the Coalition had lost. But these ships carried something the alien vessels had not. They carried the children of a world where only the toughest survived. Where giving up meant dying and dying meant your family and friends would die too. The communications officer announced that Admiral Morrison was ready to address the fleet from his flagship Prometheus. Marcus had served under Morrison during the border wars against the rogue artificial intelligence. The admiral was old and tough and had never lost a battle. When the odds were against him, Morrison appeared on the screen and his voice carried to every ship in the fleet. He told them they were facing an enemy that could destroy the most advanced civilization in the galaxy in less than a day. But humans had advantages the aliens did not expect. They were not fighting to protect their comfortable lives or their beautiful cities. They were Deathworlders fighting because someone needed them to, and they were too stubborn to know when they were beaten. Marcus smiled at that. Too stubborn to know when they were beaten. That sounded about right for humans. The Admiral reminded them that the Coalition had thought their superior technology would protect them. They had fought like civilized beings following rules that made sense to people who lived on safe worlds. But humans were going to fight like what they really were. Survivors from a planet that had tried to kill them every day for millions of years. As the transmission ended, Marcus felt the cold feeling settling in his chest that always came before a fight. It was the same feeling he had felt during every battle since leaving Earth, the knowledge that they might all die, but they would make the enemy pay for every human life. Torres announced that all ships were ready for the jump to faster than light speed. Marcus gave the order and space began to blur around them as they headed toward Coalition territory and whatever was waiting there. Somewhere ahead was an enemy that had swept aside the galaxy's most advanced civilization like they were insects. But they had never faced Deathworlders before. They were about to learn the difference between fighting civilized aliens and fighting the children of Earth. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the cargo bay of the heavy cruiser, Retribution watching the last of the modified weapons being loaded into their launch tubes. Around her the largest human fleet ever assembled prepared for a journey into unknown space. She had commanded this ship for 3 years but had never seen the crew work with such focused intensity. The weapons they were loading were not the elegant energy beams that other species used. They were simple kinetic rounds designed to punch holes through armor and explosive warheads meant to tear ships apart. Human weapons were crude compared to alien technology, but they had one advantage. They were designed by people who understood that sometimes you had to break things completely to make them stop working. Lieutenant Commander James Wright approached with a datapad in his hands. He was her tactical officer and one of the smartest people she had ever served with. His face was grim as he read from his reports. Wright told her they now had 67 ships total. Everything from small destroyers to the massive dreadnought Prometheus. Fleet Admiral Morrison had divided them into 3 battle groups so they could attack from different angles if needed. Elena nodded and looked at the holographic display showing their destination. The Kepler 442 system had been the Coalition's primary naval base until 3 days ago. Now their sensors showed nothing but expanding clouds of debris and radiation signatures that made their instruments scream warnings. She asked Wright if there was any word from the advanced reconnaissance team. His expression grew even darker as he consulted his datapad. The stealth ship Shadow had made contact with Coalition survivors in the Vega Primus system. Captain Martinez had sent back reports that made Elena's blood run cold. Wright said it was bad. Entire planets had been stripped down to bare rock. Billions of people were dead. The coalition fleet of over 3,000 ships had lasted less than 6 hours against whatever they were calling the Devourers. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The coalition had technology that humans could barely understand. Energy shields that could deflect the radiation from stars and weapons that could crack moons apart. If such a powerful force had been destroyed so quickly, then whatever they were facing was beyond anything humans had ever encountered, the communications officer announced. They were receiving a priority transmission from the fleet flagship, Admiral. Morrison himself was calling from the bridge of the Prometheus. Elena had never met the Admiral in person, but his reputation preceded him. He was old and scarred and had never backed down from a fight in 40 years of service. The main screen showed Morrison standing on the bridge of humanity's most advanced warship. Behind him, Elena could see the organized chaos of a crew preparing for battle. Officers ran between stations checking systems and loading weapons. The Admiral waited for them to finish their work before he spoke, Morrison told the fleet. He would not lie to them about what they were facing. Intelligence reports suggested they were going up against an enemy that viewed the Coalition's advanced technology the way humans might view stone tools. But humans had advantages that the enemy would not expect. The Admiral said they were not fighting to preserve elegant cities or maintain comfortable lives. They were Deathworlders. They were fighting because someone needed them to, and they were too stubborn to know when they were beaten. Elena heard several of her bridge crew chuckle. At that comment, it was true enough. Humans had a reputation across the galaxy for being too aggressive and too willing to fight. Other species saw this as a character flaw, but humans saw it as what had kept them alive on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. Morrison reminded them that the Coalition had thought their superior technology would protect them. They had fought like civilized beings following rules of engagement that made sense to people from peaceful worlds. But humans were going to fight like what they actually were. Survivors from a planet where only the strongest and most stubborn lived long enough to have children. As the transmission ended, Elena felt the familiar cold settling in her chest. It was the same feeling she had experienced during the border wars against the artificial intelligence that had tried to wipe out human colonies. The same steel determination that had carried humanity through every crisis since they first left Earth and discovered they were not alone in the universe. She told Wright to signal the fleet that all ships were ready for the jump to hyperspace. He confirmed the order and began entering coordinates for their destination. Coalition space was 18 hours away at maximum speed. Elena walked to the main view screen and watched as the other human ships prepared to jump. Each one represented years of human engineering and thousands of hours of training. The crews were volunteers who had signed up knowing they might never come home. But they had also signed up knowing that if they did not fight, then no one else would. The Coalition had spent centuries building their perfect civilization on worlds where the weather was always mild and the animals were always gentle. They had created art and music and literature while humans were still fighting wars over resources and territory. Their technology was so advanced it seemed like magic to human scientists, but when something worse than anything they could imagine had come, for them they had not known how to respond. They had followed their standard military procedures and used their standard weapons and tactics. They had fought like people who expected the universe to be reasonable and fair. Humans knew better. They had been born on a world where fairness was something you had to fight for, and reasonableness was a luxury that only the strong could afford. Earth had taught them that sometimes the only way to win was to be willing to lose everything in the attempt. Wright announced that all ships were ready and awaiting the jump signal. Elena gave the order and felt the familiar sensation of faster-than-light travel as space blurred around them. The fleet was now committed to a course that would take them deep into alien territory to face an enemy that had conquered the most advanced civilization in known space. Elena thought about the Coalition survivors hiding in damaged ships and ruined stations. They had sent their desperate message to humans because they had no other choice. The species they had always considered too primitive and violent to be trusted were their only hope for survival. It was ironic in a way that appealed to Elena's dark sense of humor. The galaxy had spent years telling humans they were too dangerous to be given full membership in galactic civilization. They had been quarantined to their own small section of space and told to stay there until they learned to be more civilized. Now, the civilized species were begging the dangerous humans to save them from something even worse. Elena looked around, her bridge at the crew preparing for what might be their last battle. These people had grown up knowing they came from a death world. They had been raised on stories about how their ancestors had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and extinctions. They were the children of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on the most hostile planet anyone had ever discovered. The Devourers were about to learn what that meant. Wright reported they were halfway to their destination with no problems detected. All ships were maintaining formation, and all systems were operating normally. Elena nodded and settled into her command chair for the long wait until they reached Coalition space. She spent the time thinking about what they would find when they arrived. The reports from the survivors painted a picture of complete devastation. Worlds stripped of all life and entire fleets reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Whatever the Devourers were, they seemed to view organic life as nothing more than raw materials to be harvested, but they had never encountered humans before. They had never faced a species that had been forged in the crucible of a world where everything was trying to kill everything else. They were about to discover the difference between conquering civilized aliens and trying to exterminate the children of Earth. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Altair system, and immediately every alarm on every ship began screaming warnings. Commander Nathan Cross stood on the bridge of the destroyer Defiance and felt his blood turn to ice. As the sensor displays filled with readings that should have been impossible, sensor operator Riley Foster sat at her station with her hands shaking as she tried to make sense of what her instruments were telling her. Her voice was barely a whisper when she called for the commander to look at what she had found. Cross walked over to her station and looked at the main display. Where the garden world of Altair Prime should have been, there was only a skeletal framework of crystalline material stretching across the planet's former orbit. It looked like a spider web made of stars, and it was perfectly geometric in a way that hurt to look at. Foster reported no life signs anywhere in the system. No organic matter of any kind could be detected. But the energy readings were beyond anything in their databases. Something was drawing power directly from the star itself, and the star was growing dimmer as they watched. Cross asked for a detailed scan of the crystalline structure. The results made him step back from the display. In shock, the framework was not just where the planet had been. It extended throughout the entire system, connecting every moon and asteroid in a vast network of alien construction. Before Cross could give any orders, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Ships emerged from the geometric lattice around the dead world, but they did not look like any ships Cross had ever seen. They moved with impossible grace, and their hulls seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal shaped by some alien intelligence. Admiral Morrison's voice came through the fleet communication system. He reported visual confirmation of enemy vessels and gave them the designation Devourer ships. The computer counted approximately 200 contacts, and the number was still rising as more ships emerged from the crystalline web. Cross studied the enemy vessels through the tactical viewer. Each one was unique, as if it had been grown rather than built. Their surfaces seemed to absorb light itself, making them difficult to track visually. There were no windows or obvious weapon ports or any signs of the engineering principles that humans understood. Communications Officer Technical Sergeant Maria Santos reported they were receiving a transmission, but it was not coming from the enemy ships. The signal was originating from the crystalline lattice itself, as if the entire structure was somehow alive and aware. The bridge speakers filled with a sound that was not quite a voice and not quite the noise of a machine, but something far worse than either. When the universal translator processed the alien words, they made every human on the bridge step back in instinctive fear. The voice said it was curious about the prey species from the isolated spiral arm that had arrived in their territory. It noted that human biochemistry was different and inefficient. but said humans had survived their hostile world through adaptation rather than transcendence. It called this development quaint as if it found human evolution amusing. Admiral Morrison responded over the communication channel, identifying himself as Fleet Admiral Robert Morrison of the Human Defense Force. He demanded that the aliens identify themselves and explain their intentions in coalition space. The alien response carried what might have been amusement. It said intentions were irrelevant because they were purpose itself. They were the inevitable refinement of biological chaos. The coalition had understood this before they were incorporated into the alien design. Their organized matter now served a higher function. Cross realized that incorporated was their term for complete genocide and the consumption of entire worlds. The coalition's 3,000 ships and billions of people had been processed like raw materials in some vast alien manufacturing system. The voice continued saying that human resistance was noted but irrelevant. However, it found the human genetic template interesting and said humans might prove useful as a control group before integration. The casual way it discussed the complete destruction of humanity made Cross's hands clench into fists. The Devourer ships began moving toward the human fleet with the patience of predators that knew their prey had nowhere to run. Cross found himself thinking of the great white sharks he had encountered during survival training in Earth's oceans. They were perfect killers shaped by millions of years of evolution, and they never stopped hunting. Morrison's voice came through the communication system again, ordering all ships to battle stations. He reminded the fleet that they were not there to win, but to show these aliens that Deathworlders did not surrender quietly. He told them to make the enemy pay for every inch of space they took. Cross felt the familiar cold determination settling over him as the Defiance powered up its weapon systems. Around him, the bridge crew worked with the efficiency that came from years of training, and the knowledge that they were about to face an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The tactical display showed the enemy ships spreading out in perfect formations as they approached the human fleet. Their movements were coordinated with mathematical precision as if they were all parts of a single vast organism rather than individual vessels with separate crews. Foster reported that the enemy ships were not showing any of the energy signatures associated with normal propulsion systems. They seemed to be moving through space without any visible means of acceleration or maneuvering. It was as if they were swimming through the vacuum like fish through water. Santos announced that the aliens were transmitting again. This time the voice carried a tone of scientific interest, as if the Devourers were studying the humans like specimens in a laboratory. They said human behavior patterns were unlike anything in their extensive database of conquered species. The voice noted that most civilizations they encountered tried to preserve their individual existence through technological advancement or negotiation. But humans seemed to be preparing for combat despite being completely outmatched in terms of numbers and technology. It called this behavior pattern fascinating and potentially useful. For their research, Cross keyed his communication system to respond to the alien transmission. He told them that humans had one advantage that all their previous victims had lacked. Humans had been born on a world where everything was trying to kill them, and they had spent millions of years learning how to fight back. Against impossible odds, the alien response was immediate and carried a tone that might have been confusion. They said they had analyzed human technology and found it primitive compared to coalition standards. Human weapons and defenses would be ineffective against Devourer capabilities. Resistance would only prolong the inevitable incorporation process. Cross smiled grimly as he prepared to show them exactly how wrong they were. The enemy was right that human technology was primitive compared to what the coalition had possessed. But they had made the same mistake that every other species made when they looked at humanity. They saw the crude weapons and simple tactics and assumed that meant humans were weak. They had never encountered a species that treated their own deaths as an acceptable tactical outcome. They had never faced an enemy that had been forged in the fires of a world where only the most savage and determined survived long enough to reproduce. The Devourer ships were close enough now that Cross could see details of their flowing metallic hulls through the main viewer. They moved with the confidence of predators that had never encountered effective resistance. In their database of conquered civilizations, there was probably no record of any species that had managed to inflict significant casualties on their fleets. Cross gave the order to begin the attack and felt the Defiance shudder as her weapons fired for the first time against an alien enemy. Around him, the bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency, knowing that they were about to become the first humans to test their strength against beings that viewed entire civilizations as nothing more than resources to be harvested. The enemy was about to learn that humans viewed death differently than any other species they had encountered. For humans, death was not the end of resistance, but simply another weapon to be used against their enemies. They were about to discover what happened when you tried to incorporate the children of a death world into your perfect design. The battle erupted across the Altair system as human weapons met Devourer technology for the first time. Captain Alexander Stone commanded the battlecruiser Vengeance and watched in horror as enemy vessels passed through their energy shields. Like the barriers were not even there, Weapons Officer Lieutenant Samuel Hayes reported that they had scored a direct hit on the destroyer. Courage, but the enemy response was unlike anything they had prepared for. The ship's hull was being dissolved at the molecular level by some kind of energy weapon that turned solid matter into something else entirely. Stone watched through the tactical viewer as the brave crew of the Courage abandoned ship in escape pods. But even the small evacuation vessels were consumed by the same terrifying energy that had claimed their ship. The Devourer weapons did not just destroy their targets. They converted matter into raw materials that could be used for alien construction projects. Communications Specialist Corporal Diana Webb announced that Admiral Morrison was signaling all ships with new tactical instructions. Stone felt a chill of recognition when she heard the designation. Protocol Omega was humanity's most desperate contingency plan, and it had only been used once before during the worst days of the border wars. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos of battle as human ships died around them. He ordered all units to switch to Protocol Omega immediately. Conventional weapons were proving completely ineffective against enemy defenses, and they needed to try something the aliens would not expect. Stone felt a cold certainty settle over her as she realized what the Admiral was ordering. Protocol Omega was a tactic so desperate that even human military doctrine classified it as a last resort. It relied on the one advantage that Deathworlders possessed over every other species they had encountered in the galaxy. Humans were willing to embrace mutual destruction if it meant taking their enemies with them. Stone ordered Hayes to arm all nuclear warheads and set them for proximity detonation with manual override capability. Hayes looked at her with shock in his eyes as he realized what she was planning. He protested that following those orders would be suicide for everyone on the ship. Stone told him that suicide was not the right word. What they were about to do was strategy. The kind of strategy that only made sense to people who had been born on a world where survival meant being willing to sacrifice everything to protect what mattered most. Across the human fleet, ships began accelerating directly toward the Devourer vessels, abandoning all pretense of long-range combat. The massive dreadnought Prometheus led the charge with Admiral Morrison himself at the helm. The huge ship aimed itself like a guided missile at the largest enemy construct in the alien formation. The Devourer response was immediate and telling. For the first time since the engagement began, their perfect formations wavered as individual ships tried to evade the approaching humans. These beings had conquered countless civilizations through technological superiority and calculated precision. They had never encountered an enemy that viewed their own destruction as an acceptable tactical outcome. The alien voice crackled across all communication channels, and for the first time it carried something that might have been uncertainty. It said that human behavior was irrational and that continuation of their current course would result in total mutual annihilation for both fleets. Stone keyed her communication system to respond to the alien transmission. She told them they were about to learn why the galaxy called humans Deathworlders. Humans had been dying for causes they believed in since they first climbed down from the trees on their hostile homeworld. The human fleet struck the enemy formation like a hammer forged in Earth's crushing gravity. Ship after ship rammed directly into Devourer vessels with nuclear warheads detonating at point-blank range. The heavy cruiser Retribution took 3 enemy ships with her as Captain Vasquez manually triggered her reactor overload while locked. In combat with alien boarders, the destroyer Defiance carved through a Devourer formation like a kinetic missile with Commander Cross and his crew singing an ancient war song as they embraced the void. Every human ship that died took at least 1 enemy vessel with them, and some managed to destroy multiple targets before their own destruction. But the most devastating blow came from Admiral Morrison himself aboard the flagship Prometheus. The dreadnought accelerated to ramming speed directly toward the geometric lattice that had once been the planet. Altair Prime, Devourer ships swarmed to intercept the massive human vessel, but Morrison had one final surprise for them. The Admiral's last transmission reached every surviving human ship in the system. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke the words that would become legend among the human survivors. He said it was for Earth and for the species that had never learned how to quit fighting, the Prometheus reactor went critical just as the ship impacted the alien construct, and for a brief moment a new star blazed in the Altair system. When the blinding light faded, nearly half the Devourer fleet was gone, and their perfect formations had been shattered by an enemy that fought like the apex predators of a world where only the most savage creatures survived. In the aftermath, Stone found herself in command of the surviving human forces as the highest-ranking officer still alive. The battle cruiser Vengeance was damaged but still functional, and she could count 12 other human ships that had survived the desperate gambit, but something unprecedented was happening around them. The remaining Devourer ships were not pressing their attack or moving to finish off the crippled human vessels. Instead, they were withdrawing toward the edge of the system as if they were reassessing the situation. The alien voice returned over the communication channels, but now it carried something new. Something that sounded almost like respect mixed with confusion. It said that human behavior was fascinating and that their species prioritized survival of the group over preservation of individual units. The voice admitted that this tactical approach was unexpected in their database of conquered civilizations. Most species they encountered tried to preserve their technology and their leaders when faced with overwhelming force. But humans had deliberately sacrificed their most advanced ship and their highest-ranking commander to inflict maximum damage. On the enemy. Stone keyed her communicator to respond to the alien analysis. She told them they had wanted to study humans as a control group for their research. She said congratulations because they had just learned that Deathworlders did not surrender or retreat or negotiate with genocidal machines. Humans just kept fighting until one side or the other stopped moving permanently. The Devourer ships continued their withdrawal, and Stone realized that something unprecedented was occurring. For the first time in their apparent history, the Devourers had encountered prey that could hurt them badly enough to make them reconsider their tactics. The surviving human ships regrouped around the damaged Vengeance and began rescue operations. For any crew members who had survived in escape pods or damaged sections of destroyed vessels, the casualty reports were devastating, but they had achieved something that no other species had managed. They had made the galaxy's most advanced predator species blink first. Webb reported that they were receiving transmissions from other human ships scattered throughout Coalition space. The desperate gambit at Altair had bought time for evacuation fleets to rescue Coalition survivors and establish defensive positions around key systems, but more importantly, it had shown the Devourers that humans were not like any other species they had encountered. The children of Earth did not fight to preserve their comfortable civilization or their advanced technology. They fought because someone needed them to, and they would rather die than let evil triumph unopposed. Stone looked around the bridge of her damaged ship at the crew members who had survived humanity's first battle against the galaxy's apex predator. These people had just proven that sometimes being called dangerous and primitive was actually a compliment. The Devourers had learned that there was a difference between conquering civilized aliens who followed predictable patterns and trying to exterminate the children of a death world who had been born fighting, and would die fighting if necessary. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you cornered a species that had never learned the meaning of surrender. 3 weeks after the Battle of Altair, Captain Alexandra Stone stood in the command center of humanity's first deep space fortress, watching an unprecedented event unfold. The surviving Devourer fleet had requested a meeting in the neutral zone between human and former Coalition territory. Lieutenant Commander Roy Mitchell had been transferred from the destroyed ship Courage to serve as her new tactical officer. He reported that sensor sweeps confirmed 12 Devourer vessels holding position exactly where they had said they would be. There were no signs of aggressive posturing or attempts at infiltration. Stone nodded but found it difficult to process what was happening. In the weeks following the battle at Altair, the Devourers had done something that contradicted every report from Coalition survivors. They had stopped expanding, stopped consuming worlds, stopped being the unstoppable force that had swept through inhabited space like a plague of living metal. Communications Officer Lieutenant Sarah Walsh announced they were receiving the promised transmission from the alien fleet. Stone steeled herself for another encounter with the cold intelligence that had casually discussed the incorporation of entire civilizations. The view screen activated, but instead of the geometric perfection Stone had expected, she saw something far more disturbing. The being that appeared was clearly once organic, with traces of what might have been the Coalition's aquatic ancestry, but its flesh had been replaced with the same flowing metallic substance that comprised Devourer ships. Its eyes held an intelligence that seemed both ancient and newly awakened, as if it had recently gained the ability to think independently. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made Stone's teeth ache, but the words were carefully chosen and strangely respectful. The being identified itself as Synthesizer Primary and said it spoke for what remained of their collective consciousness. Stone stepped forward and identified herself as Captain Stone, representing the Human Defense Force. She told the alien to start talking because humans did not have patience for diplomatic games. The Synthesizer Primary seemed to approve of her direct approach. It said humans were efficient and practical, as they had come to expect from the species. Then it said something that made Stone's blood run cold. They had reconsidered their approach to biological integration. Stone corrected the alien terminology. Bluntly, she said they meant genocide, not integration. The alien entity paused, as if considering the human perspective on their actions. It admitted that from a biological viewpoint their activities could be seen as genocide, but they preferred to think of it as optimization. The Synthesizer Primary explained that for 7 million years they had encountered countless species across the galaxy. Some had resisted briefly before accepting incorporation. Others had embraced transcendence willingly. All had followed the same predictable pattern of trying to preserve individual existence through technological advancement, but humans were different in a way that had never occurred before in their vast database of conquered civilizations. Humans did not seek to transcend their biological limitations through technology. Instead, they weaponized those limitations and used them as sources of strength rather than weakness. Science Officer Dr. Amanda Cruz spoke up from behind Stone, asking if the alien was saying that humans were too crazy to assimilate properly. The Synthesizer Primary responded with what Stone was beginning to recognize as alien amusement. It explained that integrating human genetic templates had produced unexpected results in their incorporation process. The hybrid entities created from fallen human warriors had not achieved the peaceful optimization that the Devourers expected. Instead, they retained essential human characteristics, like aggression and independence and an irrational willingness to sacrifice everything for abstract concepts. Stone felt horror creeping up her spine as she realized what the alien was telling her. They had been converting dead and captured humans into the same kind of metallic hybrid beings that comprised their collective consciousness. But instead of creating obedient servants, they had accidentally created rebels. The Synthesizer Primary confirmed her worst fears. The attempted incorporation of human psychological patterns had been catastrophic to their collective harmony. Hybrid entities infected with human values had begun questioning the purpose of their expansion and sabotaging their operations from within. In several cases, the human-influenced hybrids had actually attempted to restore consumed worlds to their original biological states. They had tried to undo the optimization process and return organic life to planets that had been converted to pure geometric efficiency. Stone asked what the Devourers wanted from humanity. The answer came without hesitation. They wanted coexistence. Humans would be granted permanent territorial sovereignty over their current systems, plus any former coalition worlds that had not yet been processed. In return, humans would contain their expansion and prevent further contamination of the Devourer collective consciousness. The alien made it clear that human psychological patterns were like a virus that could spread through their perfect order and destroy everything they had built over millions of years. Stone almost laughed at the implications. The galaxy's most advanced predator species was asking humanity to stay in their corner of space and not infect the rest of the universe with Deathworld values like independence and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. She asked what would happen if humans refused the offer. The synthesizer primary response carried the weight of absolute certainty. They would devote their entire existence to eliminating humanity regardless of the cost to themselves. Humans represented an evolutionary dead end that threatened the ordered perfection they had spent eons creating. The alien admitted they would prefer coexistence, but said they would accept mutual annihilation rather than risk of further contamination of their collective. It was a threat and an offer of respect at the same time. The Devourers recognized that humans were too dangerous to conquer and too infectious to ignore. Stone looked around her bridge crew and saw the same mixture of pride and horror reflected in their faces. Humanity had found their place in the galaxy as the species too dangerous to defeat and too stubborn to contain. They had become the thing that even apex predators avoided. She told the synthesizer primary that she would need to discuss the offer with Earth Command, but thought she could speak for her species on one point. Humans had never been good at staying put when there were people who needed help somewhere in the galaxy. The alien response carried the weight of inevitability. It said they understood each other perfectly and that the question remaining was whether the galaxy was large enough for both kinds of evolution. The ordered perfection of the Devourers and the chaotic determination of the Deathworlders. As the transmission ended, Stone realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had forced the ultimate predator to negotiate instead of simply consuming everything in their path. The children of Earth had proven that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. Mitchell reported that they were receiving messages from human ships throughout the galaxy. Rescue fleets were evacuating coalition survivors and establishing defensive positions around key systems. The former alien territory was being transformed into a vast refugee camp protected by human weapons and human willingness to die rather than surrender. Stone thought about what the galaxy would look like in the coming years. Humans would be the guardians of everyone who could not protect themselves. They would be the species that other civilizations called when something too terrible to handle appeared in their space. It was not the role that humanity had expected when they first reached the stars. They had hoped to join a peaceful galactic community and learn from species more advanced than themselves. Instead, they had become the galaxy's immune system against threats too dangerous for civilized beings to handle. The irony was not lost on Stone. The same traits that made humans too violent and primitive for polite galactic society were exactly what made them invaluable. When something worse than violence and primitiveness appeared, the galaxy needed Deathworlders precisely because they were Deathworlders. Walsh reported that Earth Command was responding to their situation report. The government had voted unanimously to accept the responsibility that came with their unique position in the galaxy. Humanity would be the shield that protected civilization from the things that civilization could not face. Stone settled into her command chair and looked at the tactical display, showing human ships spread across dozens of star systems. Each one represented thousands of people who had volunteered to stand between the innocent and the darkness that lurked in the spaces. Between stars. They were the children of a world that had tried to kill them every day for millions of years. Now they would use the strength that world had given them to protect species that had never known such hardship. It was a purpose worthy of the price they had paid to earn it. The Devourers had learned that some evolutionary paths led to places where even apex predators feared to tread. In the vast cosmos that might just be enough to keep the light burning in the darkness.